name's Katherine Ashmore and welcome to the Mindset Exchange. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to bring you esteemed orthopaedic consultant Mr. Kash Akhtar. Kash is not just a renowned knee specialist, he also runs his own podcast called the Ortho Hub, See One, Do One, with orthopaedic consultant Pete Bates, but this time he's going to be the one who's being interviewed. In our conversation, we explore the often unseen side of surgeons, the person behind the surgical gown. Together, we delve into the pressures surgeons face to maintain a brave front and the stigma surrounding mental health, the vital role of effective communication and compassionate leadership in the surgical field, the power of developing a growth mindset and focusing on one's personal journey, and the resilience needed to reach the pinnacle of a surgical career and the challenges of finding balance, and how even rare complications can deeply affect surgeons in their practice, and much, much more. Kash's openness and willingness to share his insights is a rare gift from a surgeon. This episode is brimming with wisdom and tips that extend beyond the realm of healthcare, touching on universal themes of resilience, leadership and personal growth. So join us for this enlightening and inspiring conversation. Whether you're in healthcare or not, or simply seeking motivation, you won't want to miss this one. Thank you, Kash, for your candour and for shedding light on the human side of surgery. Stay tuned and get ready to go beyond the scalpel. Here goes. Hi everyone, I'd like to welcome orthopaedic consultant Kash Akhtar to the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here at the beginning of your kind of podcast journey.
I'm excited to have you here. For those listeners who don't know you, would you mind sharing a bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. So my main job, the day job, I'm a consultant trauma and orthopaedic surgeon. I work at Barts Health NHS Trust, the Royal London Hospital, and I'm also at Cleveland Clinic London, and I specialise in knees. My kind of very specific focus, how we met, is I particularly kind of have an emphasis on sports injuries and arthroscopic or keyhole surgery. I am also a reader or associate professor in orthopaedic surgery and surgical education at Barts London Medical School, where I run a master's program. And medical education kind of teaching and training my passion. So I've got 2 further medical education degrees and a fellowship, which is in addition to my medical and surgical training. I'm a training program director for the Royal London Rotation. I sit on the SAC, which is the Specialist Advisory Committee, and on the Executive Committee for BASC, which is the British Association for Surgery of the Knee. I'm also a co-founder of Ortho Hub, which, as you mentioned, the online education platform. So in my spare time, I co-host the Ortho Hub See One, Do One podcast. That's been downloaded in just over 135 countries now, and we've just hit 250,000 downloads, so lots going on.
Congratulations. That's just amazing, Kash, and well deserved. And I'm really, really grateful that you can make time to do this podcast. You're a very busy man. So in today's episode, I'd like to focus on the human behind the clinician, so to speak. Often in healthcare, many clinicians and surgeons I know feel like they have to put on a brave face when it's a pretty stressful job. So to begin with, why do you think that is?
There are actually quite a few reasons thinking about it. I think the main thing I want to start off with is that it is a huge privilege to be able to help people, do something that challenges you at multiple levels. You use your skills, you work with the multidisciplinary team of physio, and you get people back fitter, faster, stronger than they ever were, doing things that they want. But the thing is, how all of healthcare, not just orthopaedic surgery, is really quite demanding, but surgery in particular is physically demanding as well as emotionally. So one of the reasons we feel compelled to put on a brave face is that we do have we have an inherent responsibility towards our patients. They come to you seeking help. They're often in vulnerable situations. And so of course, the day job is treating the medical issues, but we have to give them reassurance and support, because when someone has confidence in you and you can speak to them, they will listen, they will feel involved, they will do better. But there is also a societal expectation that doctors and healthcare professionals should have it together, should be pillars of strength and confidence. And it's a really important aspect of our role, but we have to acknowledge we're human too. And that's the thing. So that's the dichotomy, the challenge. We do experience stress, fatigue, sometimes even doubt or anxiety. And I think the last thing is there is a culture within healthcare. There's still a stigma surrounding mental health issues in doctors, and seeking help or admitting vulnerability can be a sign of weakness. There is a pressure to put on this armor, this facade, even though you may be struggling. Yeah. But the thing is, I think that if we acknowledge our own humanity and we include our vulnerabilities, it makes us better doctors. We can actually empathize with patients on a more human level, opens doors for more open conversations about mental health and self-care. And I think in doing so, if we take better care of ourselves, we'll take better care of our patients.
Absolutely. And regarding the stress, as you know, I set up a group during the pandemic, which helped a lot of clinicians with anxiety and stress. And the imposter syndrome and the perfectionism is high in healthcare. And so there is this culture of expectation, which is also a bit of a backdrop. So given that there's still this adaptation or an adjustment to getting that understanding across that we are all human and that surgeons are human, healthcare professionals are human, and it is a pretty stressful job, what qualities do you believe are essential then for someone to succeed as a surgeon with that backdrop?
I think the imposter syndrome is interesting that you mentioned, the imposter phenomenon, however you term it. I don't think it ever goes away. I've been a consultant for almost 10 years now, and I get invited to lots of nice things of increasing visibility and seniority, and yet it never goes away. I had it a couple of weeks ago. I got invited to teach on the next level. And so I've come to terms to accept that everyone is in that same boat. And I think I'm not the only person with feeling that. And I'm really realizing that talking to some really quite senior people, mentors and people I respect and admire. To answer your question, we know that the main three kind of broad headings I think of to make a good surgeon are the technical abilities. So you need cognitive skills, you need personal qualities. So the key obviously is technical proficiency. You must have hand-eye coordination and dexterity, and you've got to be precise because you've got to do the operation accurately. And off particular things I'm doing, I'm often operating down here, my hands are down here, but I'm looking up at a screen up there. And the patient's down here. You're very in different places, and you do reach a state of flow once you've done enough of those cases. So technical proficiency goes without saying. You need critical thinking and problem-solving skills, because surgery often does present complex and unpredictable situations. And you have to, what I tell the trainees, you must be able to do what I call the 3 A's. So you must be able to assess, analyze, and adapt, because things will always change during an operation. You must have attention to detail. And I drive my family crazy with my attention to detail, how anal I am. But the thing is, small errors can have quite significant consequences. And so we want to be as meticulous and accurate as possible. Communication skills, I think that's interesting. And the longer I do this, the more I realize that technical skills can be taught, and so can communication skills. But that personal engagement, that rapport with the patients to explain the options, work with multidisciplinary teams, work with your physios, to be able to convey information clearly, empathetically, is a really key skill. So empathy and compassion is vital. I mean, the thing is, surgery, I've been very fortunate so far, touch wood, never had an operation, done thousands. And I can imagine it must be really stressful and intimidating for patients. You go into this clinic, a bizarre situation, there's people using jargon that you don't understand. So I always make sure that I explain it to alleviate anxiety, and it builds trust. If you build trust, you get better outcomes, patients more satisfied, and that's what you want. There's a couple other things, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
You've got to be resilient. I've thought about this, you see, because I had to give a talk on this. So you've got to be really resilient and adaptable, because it's changing circumstances, long hours, can be physically demanding. And the other thing is that continuous learning and improvement are really key. It's a lifelong process. The thing that's interesting is that I'm doing multiple operations now that I did not learn during my training or that I learned from fellowship. So a quads tendon ACL, doing a lateral tenodesis, there is a root repair. There's 5 or 6 quite major operations for which the equipment and the technical aspects are developed in the last 5 years. And so that's why you've got to continuously learn. So although I'm not at my peak yet, I've been a consultant for 10 years and I think there's more to come, but I'm doing that. And you have to work as part of a team. You have to demonstrate leadership in certain stages because you are part of a team, but someone has to direct the flow, particularly during an operation. But teamwork is key. It's collaborative. I work with anaesthetists. There are ODPs in theatre. There are scrub nurses. I work with physios in the ward, occupational therapists, nutritionists, psychologists. All these things come into play. And so I think you have to reflect and you've got to be accountable. I think you have to get feedback from patients, feedback from peers. I'm really big on feedback, really big on hearing from people as to how to improve, because that's the only way we're going to get what I want is kind of compassionate, patient-centered care. And that's what makes a difference to people's lives. So I think those are the key things that you need to be a surgeon.
What I'm hearing is it's down to a lot of teamwork and also continuous professional learning, of course. If you don't mind me delving a bit deeper, you mentioned earlier that you have to be a leader in what you do. How do you manage the pressure that there must be as a surgeon, balanced with the leadership qualities that you need to do your job?
See, the challenge is at the end of the day, there's only one name that kind of goes above the patient's bed. And there may be 15 people involved in delivering someone's care. But if someone has a less than ideal outcome or a complication, which are very rare, but if they happen, there's only one person no one will say who was the ODP when such and such happened, or who was that's the operating department practitioner, or who was the scrub nurse who handed you the thing, or why the kit wasn't available. It's totally on you. And you do have to demonstrate leadership. And so there is compassionate leadership. Someone has to take responsibility for what's going on. Someone has to take responsibility for how a procedure is progressing. And it starts from the very beginning. I send emails weeks in advance to make sure all the equipment that I need is arranged and booked. I confirm it the morning of surgery before I see the patient. I make sure we've got an appropriately informed, consented patient. We do a full check before the patient goes to sleep of all the equipment, of everything that we possibly need. And there's a thing called a team brief in the morning. And in that team brief, we'll talk about what are any potential steps that could go wrong and what would happen if you would do that. And I do really have a plan A and a plan B. 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So I have a plan A and a plan B for almost everything that I do. And we make sure all the kits then and people and the staff are aware. Although it is interesting because we are focused on the surgical side, but I probably operate on comfortably less than a quarter of the patients I see. And so a lot of patients can make a full recovery without an operation. That leadership is slightly different. The outpatient department, it's more of a conversation. It genuinely is shared decision making. It's a relationship. It's the patient, the doctor, and the physio treating them. But it's in surgery where you've got to take a bit more of a lead and be a bit more vocal.
You mentioned you have your checklists and backup plans, and that's all very thorough. And it sounds like a lot to think of, but also a lot of systems in place to help as well. How do you find the balance? It sounds like a lot of work. So how do you find the balance of work and then being able to switch off at home?
I find it difficult, truth be told, and I do quite a lot during the week. My home time is very much family time. It is. We were kind of chatting yesterday. I was running kids to swimming lessons and piano lessons and all sorts of things. And so the switch off time for me is very much family. It is I watch a lot of football. I used to play a lot of football. I don't have time to play so much. I can't really train and play. I'm a big football fan. And just finding music time and other ways to unwind. Spending time in nature is actually really quite beneficial.
Have you found these things through trial and error? Or it's just these are the things that you've enjoyed and help you switch off?
Those are the things that help me switch off. So I think it's important. The podcast is probably the most fun thing I do professionally. I don't really view it as work. And so I have this viewpoint that, yes, work that goes on into the evening, the weekend can impact on family life and really impact on you. And I, to be honest, I haven't been very good at setting boundaries. And that's something I'm kind of focusing on now. And I'm making quite a few pretty major changes coming up quite soon. But it is, if you really enjoy what you do, it doesn't feel so burdensome. I had a gap year. I went to university. I didn't get into medical school the first time I applied. And I spent in the first couple of months, I was in our local hospital in Wickham General in the kitchen cleaning pot wash. So I was doing pot wash for a couple of months. And then I ended up getting taken out there and putting into the office and made a catering manager. And I've had jobs and I've done jobs in medical school during the summer whereby I look at the clock and I go, gosh, it's 9:10. And I look again and I go, oh my God, it's 9:20. You know what? I'll go for a pee. And I'll walk really slowly just to kill the time. So I've been there. And the fortunate thing about what we do is that you'll look at the clock and it's 11:20. You look again, it's 4:00. Time flies. I've never had the same day twice. I see a certain number. I just see knees. I don't do anything else. Just knees. In sports injury, I don't do hips. And yet I'd never have the same day twice. And actually, so I think being fulfilled in your work, being challenged in your work, having variety in your work really makes it feel less like work. And then it is important to have time outside of that switching off.
A lot of clinicians that I speak to, in my own personal experience, when you enjoy what you do, time does flow. There is also a danger that comes with it, which is because you enjoy what you do, sometimes one can take on too much.
Yeah.
And how do you find you balance that, Kash?
So terribly. And so I was slightly nervous coming on this podcast because I only get asked really to talk about knee stuff. I'm comfortable. I can talk to you about ACLs and meniscus tears all day long. I don't need to think about it twice. I don't feel exposed. And obviously talking about mindset and challenges. And so my biggest failure actually has been managing that work-life balance and taking on too much. You were talking about mindset. And I think that I developed this. So my parents are first generation immigrants. And certainly my family from a working class, lower socioeconomic class, there's very much a fixed mindset. I'm the first person in my family to go to university. And so on that basis, there's a fear of failure. I've embedded to me, you don't take risks. What would other people say? And it's all about the end results. It's all about what did you get in your exam. I remember getting 98% in my English exam once at GCSE and being, let's put it, castigated by my father. What happened to the other 2%? And it's something I've really noticed, whereas as I've got older and I've developed my medicine career, I've had to force myself to develop a growth mindset. By that, I mean whereby challenges are opportunities, where embracing feedback, you're focusing on the process. And the fact is that you need to accept that you will learn from trial and error.
Absolutely. And do you find that other mindsets have also helped you with the balance as well?
It has helped. The challenge has been, I think, and going back to that kind of fixed mindset of trying to prove your worth, I think the challenge that I've had is that I've taken on a lot of responsibilities and a lot of positions, touched on earlier. And I've probably taken on things that people do over a 10, 15-year career span all at the same time. And I'm realizing now that that's probably not a healthy way to be. The fact is that I do think now that I feel like I'm in a period of growth now, for sure. I'm now kind of I don't feel that I need to prove myself anymore. And that's only really come to me in the last 6 months or so. I feel like I've got a track record and I still want to continue to deliver and to do things. But I think now that I need to have more of a balance.
Just picking up on what you were saying earlier, if you don't mind me quoting you, you said, I don't feel I have to prove myself anymore. Do you think that that's something that a lot of doctors and surgeons feel, that they have to prove themselves?
Totally. And I think I'm sure it goes beyond medicine, beyond healthcare, but the fact is there's always a thing, particularly when you start doing a podcast, when you start doing things, that you're visible. That what would other people say? What are people going to think? Is everyone going to think that you're out for self-promotion or that? And I've heard all the whispers, and there comes a point where you realize that the people saying it don't really matter. And certainly other people's perceptions of you don't outweigh what you and your family and your close friends think of you. I've been very fortunate. We've had a lot of direct positive feedback from people on the podcast about OrthoHub, about conferences, lectures I've given, talks I've done, things I've taught on. And so that reinforces that actually the things that matter, you've got in check and that you're doing those things well.
And it matters what one thinks of oneself, doesn't it? So the haters will always hate. And sometimes with a lot of, and it's not just in the healthcare industry, it's in all sorts of professions, there'll be people that will talk ill of other people. Why? Does it really matter? I think it always helps to have that positive mindset, which it sounds like you have in abundance, Kash.
And that's
and focus on your journey and not be distracted from your journey.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, that's only really come to me in the last 6 months or so, where I would hear so many rumors and whispers and things, and the odd WhatsApp message here, and you catch stray shots here, and I'd be like, oh, hold on, where did this come from? And now I've realised that. See, my philosophy very much is that a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm inspired by the success of others. And I've got friends and colleagues and peers who've done some very impressive things recently. And I'll message them. And they're like, well, this is really unusual. And one or two of them didn't even know me before. Well, not personally, didn't know me directly. And the thing is, life isn't a zero-sum game. And I think acknowledging that someone's success doesn't take away from your achievements is a healthy place to be. And don't get me wrong, I'm not Zen. But I'm realizing now that if I'm comfortable in my own skin, have hundreds and hundreds of feedback from patients that tell me from their aspect that I'm doing the right thing. I hear it from trainees, delegates, colleagues, peers, friends. Then that's all that matters.
It's having that positive mindset, but it's also being a cheerleader, being someone, and that's part of being a good leader, isn't it? It's cheering on those people around you, but also for oneself, holding your own cheerleaders close. Therefore, you won't get distracted by the naysayers or other people that have things to say. Yeah. And everyone's allowed their own opinion, aren't they? But it's important to focus on what your future is and what your goals are and not be distracted.
No, and I feel very comfortable in my own skin. And the thing is that when I teach, as a training program director, I have 28 trainees who are registrars from beginning of registrar orthopaedic specialist training all the way up to the year before they become a consultant. And I would be delighted if they surpass me. And I support that. And I'm not going to try and hold them back, as has happened to me in my career from senior people. I'm going to support them, give them what they need, and give them the tools and the support to push on.
As you said, it's having that comfort in one's own skin. But also, it's an abundance mindset, isn't it? There's plenty for everyone. And why shouldn't we be supporting people around us who do well? Can we touch on a bit about the challenges that surgeons or yourself are finding working? I don't want to touch on politics here, but sort of in a broad sense, between the NHS and the private sector. How do you manage that as a surgeon?
So I think that a lot of the challenges are quite universal. The complexity of injuries that we see in sports knee surgery can vary quite significantly in severity, from a ligament sprain to someone who's torn every ligament in their knee, had a fracture. And so each one needs a careful assessment and a tailored treatment plan. The one thing that I have that is a little bit more robust at Cleveland Clinic is access to, so in the NHS and Cleveland, we have a multidisciplinary team. And we discuss our cases with other consultant colleagues, and we come up with shared treatment plans. Particularly, there is value for the more difficult cases, and there are a couple of wiser, older heads I can call on who've seen it all before. And I think calling on them is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a really good way to be. Work closely with radiologists as well. And radiologists are really key in part of the multidisciplinary team to come and help us understand the imaging that helps guide your decisions. I think the challenge that I have, NHS versus private that you mentioned, is rehabilitation. The success of a lot of operation really hinges on how effective post-op rehab is. I have a standard spiel I say to patients. I go, I will do this operation for you, and I've done it lots of times, and I'm pretty good. I'm pretty confident I'm good at this operation. And if you do the rehab, a year, 18 months from now, you'll be doing whatever you want to do 3 times a week, not thinking about your knee. Same operation, same surgeon, you don't do the rehab. A year from now, you'll be hobbling around saying that bastard ruined my life. And it is totally on the physio. And at Cleveland Clinic, I have a lot more direct interaction with the physiotherapists. I literally get 50 WhatsApps a day, voice notes, WhatsApps from physios asking about things. Can we do this? Can we try on this? Can you see this? What about this? And I reply to all those. And I am fully aware of what's going on. I get regular updates. I get some videos of people doing exercises, progressing, someone running. Honestly, I saw it this morning, someone kicking a ball. It makes my heart happy. And the challenge is that the physiotherapy in the NHS, as you know better than me, is thoroughly overworked, and the demand on the system is huge. And so people are treated in classes rather than one-to-one. They get 2 or 3 sessions as opposed to 15 or 20. The thing is, it governs my outcomes and how well someone does and whether a knee is stiff or not. And so that's challenging.
And that's showing a real difference between maybe the capacity, isn't it, between the NHS and the private sector. One of the other things, if you don't mind me mentioning from previous conversation, we talked a bit about the waiting lists and how that can impact outcomes. And we also talked about sometimes you're the only one doing the surgery and it can be quite a stressful, lonely process. Can you talk me through how you manage those situations?
We'll talk about complications. Complications can happen. Let's say a standard complication rate is in the order of 1 in 100. 1 is 1%. So you think 1%, the 1% risk of DVT. Well, it's probably higher, but we'll take that as a low risk. The fact is that's still 1 in 100 or an infection. And if you do the operation 100 times, the law average says 1 patient will have that. I've been very fortunate and very blessed that it's been very rare, much, much, much lower than that. But there have been a couple of occasions where things haven't turned out the way that you've hoped for no reason. The fact is, despite meticulous surgical technique in the right patient who's ready, appropriately consented, all the right equipment, the absolute optimum post-operative care, someone can still get a DVT or an infection or stiffness. And it's less than once a year. But the fact is, when it happens, it really impacts on you. For me, it's someone's put their trust, their health, their body, their well-being in your hands. For the 99% who fly, I value and cherish it. But the fact is that when someone has a less than ideal outcome, it really weighs on your mind. It wakes me up at night time. The fact is, I've woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about it before. The thing is, we are human beings. We are not invincible, and these things really do impact you. I think if I didn't care, that would worry me. And perhaps I do care. And so I think the key thing is when those things happen, to take ownership, to sit head on. I often say, I'm sorry that this has happened, even though it's a thing that's nothing directly that you've caused as such. But I'm the surgeon, I've done the operation, something has happened. Without operation, it wouldn't have happened. And so you take that on board. 99% of these things can be rectified quite in an appropriate way. And I think, and that's where the multidisciplinary team comes in, and you call on help from, be it radiologists, microbiologists, other colleagues, and you get it sorted.
So it's definitely about teamwork. And when these things happen, as you say, one can bring it back home. How do you manage that? Because as you said, it doesn't happen, thankfully, very often. But when it does weigh on one's mind, surely, and interrupts your sleep. So have you found anything that helps with managing that process?
No, I don't drink. I wonder if that'd make it easier if I did. But, I think that the thing that's interesting, I've got a very supportive partner. And I think it's really important to share and to kind of unload. And that makes a huge difference. And I think having young kids, the minute you get in the door, they're kind of screaming, I want to be a horse. Can you be a rhino? Can we play something? That takes it away straight away. And so I think that taking your mind off it helps. But the fact is, when you're there, the last time it happened to me was probably a couple of years ago. It was just after COVID. I remember wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning going, God, I wonder what so-and-so is doing right now. And then it turned out absolutely fine. But the fact is, I haven't found a way to absolve myself of taking on that responsibility.
One of the things you mentioned before was something you discovered which was quite interesting, and I don't know if fun's the right word, but you said occasionally you've done surgery with another consultant and you've really enjoyed that process. Can you talk to me about how that came about and why you do that?
Yeah, so consultant operating is something that has become more prevalent over the last few years, particularly for the more complicated cases. It's something that I've done on a few occasions for some of the big cases, and we're quite fortunate actually at Cleveland Clinic London. They allow us to do dual consultant operating. So I've operated with Tim Spalding there once or twice a month, who's a senior colleague who's been there, seen it all, done it all. We're very different personalities. He's an excellent physician, excellent doctor, an excellent surgeon. And so it does share the decision making. The hardest thing is not really the technical aspects of surgery. I can do almost anything that needs to be done. It's the decision making, do that there. And it's the thing that often, if you're on your own, you may spend 5-10 minutes just thinking about, and you're doing something with the shaver and the arthroscope, but actually you're not progressing. Whereas actually as two of you go, there, yeah, there. And it's just done. And it's funny. So I'll do an operation such as we do this concept of biological knee replacement, whereby instead of doing a metal and plastic knee replacement, you'll replace the cartilage, replace the meniscus, replace the ACL, make the knee straight. That's a 4 to 5 hour operation in anyone's hand. When Tim and I do it, it's a 2-hour operation on the tourniquet. The music's playing. It's totally relaxed. I'm doing a bit. He's preparing a graft. He brings the meniscus transplant in, fix it, puts it in, we fix it in. And doing it together, it's actually fun. It's enjoyable. And I think it's just knowing that there's someone else there to share the load. It's not about sharing responsibility in any way. But, that's there. But it's more the fact that you've discussed it with someone else. You've thought through the steps in advance, because you'll have a chat, a coffee, a plan ahead of the surgery. You'll discuss that morning with the team again. And the key thing is that I honestly believe it gives better outcomes for patients. And at the end of the day, all that matters, it doesn't matter really how I feel, as long as the patient gets the best outcome.
Which is amazing. That's with probably a more complex operation. Do you ever do that with less complex operations to share the load, as you said?
No, we never have actually. It's just such a workload to get through that the 99% of the operating I do, maybe 95 now, is single surgeon operating. It's the things that I've done routine day in, day out. But we're talking about this kind of growth mindset. The fact is that I've been a consultant for 10 years working in 2 of the leading hospitals in the country. I still feel like it's a continuous process. So I'm still going on courses. I listen to podcasts. I'll watch videos of techniques. I'll go to a lab and to do some cadaveric operating. And the thing that's interesting is that as I've kind of got older and a bit more mature, I get invited to teach on the courses now. I was on a course last week. We ran this course called Top Gun, a lab, Arthrex lab in the Midlands. And there was one of my colleagues, Pete Thompson, was demonstrating a technique. And I learned something new watching him demonstrate a technique. It was just a little tweak on what I do. And some of the delegates, one of the registrars said something. And so I really do prepare for a new operation like it's an exam. I'll read all the content. I'll read the technical stuff. I'll practice it cadaverically. I'll do it with a colleague. And then before I do it on my own.
And what I'm hearing is that passion for what you do and that wanting to know more knowledge and that interest in wanting to know more knowledge. You've talked about different mindsets and solutions for different challenges. For anyone listening, if they were facing challenges in their own lives, is there anything that you'd like to convey to them? For
sure. I think the most important thing that I've realized, I've treated lots of VIP and famous celebrity front page and back page people who seem to have it all. And what I realized is that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Every single person is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So I think just being aware of that and your interactions with people really makes a difference. I think that it's important that people recognize that all kind of setbacks and failures are not indicators of your worth or your potential. I didn't get into medical school the first time I applied. There's a variety of reasons there, if I'm honest, not particularly aptitude. But the fact is, if you accept that these setbacks are stepping stones on your journey towards success and fulfillment, and I really do view challenges as opportunities for learning, growth, and personal development. There is a reason that things happen. And I do believe that you do end up where you're supposed to end up. I do think that you definitely should get support from friends, family, loved ones, professionals if you need it for guidance or a different perspective. And I think people really must remember, and this is a really big thing in medicine that needs to be promoted more, that asking for help is a sign of strength and not weakness. Yeah. So focus on what you can control. And I think you should treat yourself with the same compassion and understanding that you'd offer to a friend facing similar circumstances. And that's where we fail.
Such great nuggets of wisdom there, Kash. Thank you so much. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast. It's just going so quickly. I want to finish off with one question. And it's one that I tend to ask a lot of guests, really, because I find it so interesting. If you could recommend one book, what would it be and why?
Let me ask you a question. If you you remember I'm a podcast host too. You can tell me this. If you live to 80 years old, how many weeks do you think that is of your life?
Lots. Don't ask me to do maths on this.
Give me a number, approximately.
Gosh, well, they're 52, so 52 times 80. What, yeah. 5,000? A bit more than that?
That's very good. It's 4,000. That's spot on. So I've asked this question to many people, and people come back and say 40,000. I've had people say, I don't know, 500,000 weeks. And so if you live to be 80, you live 4,000 weeks. That's it. So actually, the book that I read recently that's really impacted me, that's going to make a change in my life, is a book by Oliver Burkeman called 4,000 Weeks. The subtitle is kind of Time Management for Mortals. But when you realize you've got 4,000 weeks on Earth, and I'm beyond halfway of my 4,000 weeks now, then it puts it all in perspective. The thing is, the emails will never stop. The inbox will never stop. I'm looking right here. I'm looking down here at 12,023 unread emails in just one email account. And I think I've got about 6 official email accounts. That's not intentional. It's just purely the deluge of 200 emails a day. All you need is someone to send an email on a Friday, and then bank holiday Monday, and maybe you're off on leave on the Tuesday. You come back on the Wednesday, and that email was 500 emails deep, and you can't find it. And so the thing about this book, it is accepting that there's only a finite amount of things that you can do, and trying to get back control over your time rather than attempting to do it all, failing, and then beating yourself up about it. So I'd recommend that book.
Well, that sounds like a brilliant book. It's about making use of your time that you have as well. And if you're going to use that time, use it in the best possible way for yourself, as well as managing it effectively. That sounds like such a great book. And now I understand why you're putting my maths on the spot there. Only 1,000 there.
I've started using Instagram recently, very recently, and there was an account, and one of the things was a reel of kind of what people in their 90s and people on their deathbed said. And no one ever said, I wished I did more performance reviews or I did more reports. No one ever said, I wish I worked more. Not one person. And I think that it's important to, and so what I'm going to focus on now going forward from here is to regain some work-life balance.
And also what you were talking about resonates in the sense of where values fit in. So if you have a set amount of time, how do you want to spend that time? And this is where knowing one's values can be really helpful.
Thank you for having me on. As I say, it's been taking this on was me taking on some challenges and stepping out my comfort zone, because the topics we talked about are not things I've ever discussed in public. So I was apprehensive about it. And so we'll see what the response is.
Thank you for sharing it. And I think what you were sharing, you're not alone, Kash. You know, a lot of clinicians feel that they go through these alone, but there's so many shared commonalities. And I really appreciate your openness and for sharing what you have today, and for all the insights and takeaways that you've given to our listeners as well. Thanks again, Kash, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of the Mindset Exchange. Your support means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's been truly inspiring to hear about the person behind the surgeon and to gain valuable insights into Kash's challenges and triumphs. A huge thank you to Kash for his openness and willingness to share his journey. His dedication to lifting others and enhancing patient care is truly admirable. If you found this episode useful, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. Share this episode with friends, colleagues, and anyone who could benefit from Kash's inspiring words. If you'd like any help with any of the themes covered in this or previous episodes, my details are in the blurb. Stay connected with me on social media for updates and more life coaching content. Until next time, thanks for tuning into the Mindset Exchange. See you soon.